Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Algorithm. I'm your host, Victor Vinciant, and I got the Big Bad Wolf here today as a special guest. Today, we're going to talk about red pill fatigue and the burnout of modern masculinity. So, for you guys that's just joining, we'll probably politic a little bit before we get to the main topic. But while you're here, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. Tag your followers if you're watching. The show is broadcast from Facebook, so if you got people that's following on Facebook, send them over here. So this conversation is evolving because this whole trend, I'd start noticing this trend of people getting burned out by behaviors that it's just taxing people. It's just becoming the most toxic of environments and stuff, right? So you saw what I posted in the Facebook group for accountable masculinity on Facebook, and it was talking about it was a video that was posted. As a matter of fact, I think I'll go ahead and play. I'll get the video queued up. But this new trend, we put fatigue around everything that we want to see improve. That's what's really happening. And before we get into it, Big Bad Wolf, go ahead and tell the audience a little bit of something about yourself. You know.
Ah, 53-year-old male, single, no children, no wife, never been married. I reside in Niagara Falls, New York. I've run for political office that includes Niagara Falls City Council, school board. Currently, I work as an auditor in a local hotel. And I actually am getting ready to put out a book. The book should have been out last year, but I got caught up in doing a play, which is one of my other passions besides writing. So that book should be coming out in a couple of years, and I don't have the title of the book in front of me, so I do apologize. But I will forward that to Victor. He can put that out. But essentially, the book is going to be how to not waste time dating. See, a lot of people tend to focus on dating and this and this and this. And personally speaking, I don't date anymore. I'm 53. I'm out of that. I I just don't feel the need to do so. So I do realize that other people are trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, and that's what my book is going to be. That's what my book is going to be is about. It's going to be about streamlining the process of dating because a lot of people have problems with that. So that's just something I want to toss into the world as my how to and how to streamline things for people.
Okay. Well, cool, man. Well, any new projects, anything that you want the audience to, what I'm saying, know about?
No, just that I like yourself. I also co-host a podcast with another gentleman named David Glover. We appear at 9 a.m. on Mondays. We talk about everything from mental health to relationships to work. So we cover the gambit. We don't. Unfortunately, for most of the people, we don't deal with salaciousness. We deal with everyday things that's going to impact you, your kids, your family, and on a very, very personal level. We talk about our own situations relative to the topic. So a lot of people, we're slow attraction. We've been doing this. David's been at it for almost a decade. I've come along about 8 years, and we haven't hit 1,000 subscribers, but we understand the process. And for us, it's become therapeutic. So and I'll use an antidote like this. When my mother died, the old adage that the show must go on. I still appeared. Same thing when my sister died. So what we found out is that even talking among ourselves, it helps to ease the pain. And a lot of women talk about black men don't seek therapy, which actually I don't believe. What we don't do is we don't use therapy the way black women want us to. And
Yeah,
that seems to incite the crowd, which we can always get into a little bit later. But black men do seek therapy. The reason why we don't tell women about it is because they'll like to weaponize it against us. And the last thing we need as black men is another adversary.
gotcha. Understood. I respect it. The so the tone of everything that's surrounding this red pill conversation is that you know people get kind of just get tired of the conflict, man.
Mm-hmm.
And with good reason too. So one of the first things that brought that I saw, because I've been talking about this for a hot minute in my own way. I kind of saw this coming to a head a couple years ago. As a matter of fact, on the pod that I was on when I came over to you guys' platform,
Yeah.
I talked about people being radicalized.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember that part, but I said specifically people are being radicalized, and that usually happens when you have a lack somewhere,
Final
you know.
frontier for us in
So
this community.
I
We have
want I wanted to be able to bring something to the forefront, you know what I'm saying, and discuss what it looks like when people start getting radicalized and how information is coming to us. What does it look like, and why it's happening the way it's happening? And I've been a firm believer and a firm proponent of, like, the main reason that people behave the way that they behave is because they have a lack of emotional discipline. So I'm gonna play this clip right quick, and we're gonna go through a couple of clips on this show so we
Hmm.
can break down what I think is part of the problem.
a host of issues. We have a host of issues. But our biggest issue is this perceived gender war because it divides us in half. It literally splits us right down the middle. Black men, the qualities that you have that will make you a success in the street, a success in athletics, will also make you a success in education. But we putting we have to get it quick. And I get it. I get it. Women ain't gonna fuck with us if we don't got the money. If you put the phone down, all your information, first of all, just be honest about this. All of the information you're receiving from the world via the internet is being pushed to you through an algorithm, not the natural path of things. Your mentality is not the same mentality as mine because I got my experience in the world with actual people. So I know the shit that you're saying just isn't true. And if a girl your age is trying to tell you to get money and do all these things, she's receiving the same information as you. You're both being lied to. And you're both believing in the lie. And the lie is being reinforced by the music, and the lie is being reinforced by the algorithm. This phenomenon of women only seeking men for money is a very new concept. My parents was married. My dad was broke. How many? First of all, what's up with this black community that we've had to overcome all this financial poverty, but we only will get with men if they got money? That doesn't make sense, nigga. How were you born? If we've always been financially in this country in last place, but our women will only fuck with niggas who got money, how are any of us here? How? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense because they want you to aspire to degeneracy. And now you're seeking equity and degeneracy. Gotta get your mind right, man. All this shit is systemic. The algorithm is being pushed to you to push an agenda. Because the second that you start hating women and you start getting into that red pill content, all the white red pill niggas are also racist. You think that's a mistake? They're trying to push you into conservatism. Because the more conservative you are, the more likely you are to fall for religious dogma and to follow orders blindly. And then you might as well just go ahead and call yourself MAGA. You don't question authority. You exalt people just because they have money. You think because they have money that they're more intelligent than you. Money does not equate to intelligence.
Y'all go follow Deontay Kyle on TikTok. He uh he always got some provocative conversation, and he's always bringing context to the topics that we discuss. So tell me about that, man. What do you think?
His comments have to be looked at in an age appropriate manner, because for a gentleman like myself, what he's saying doesn't apply. But if you look at Gen Zs and millennials, it does. But there's this notion that money has never been an equation in relationships, even black relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a misnomer. The thing about it is, the vast majority has never heard of it because our parents were always born into a certain subset, and that subset was either a working class or an impoverished class. Very few black people ascended to that elite class. The country was never set up for us to begin with. So for blacks now to get to that point, and like you said about the culture, the music, the algorithms, yes, a lot of that's being pushed. But that also is predicated on what a person is looking for. It's the old adage, you're gonna get more of what you look for. So if you don't diversify what it is, it's just like investing. If you don't diversify what it is that you're investing in, you're only going to get one kind of outcome.
Yeah.
It's the same way with food. If you only eat one source of food, you're only going to get some vitamins, some nutrients. You're not going to get the spectrum that keeps you healthy. And therein lies the trap: is that not enough people are listening to everything so they can sit back and think critically
Yep.
about what problems that the individual has with dating, with relationships in the opposite gender, and they're following the crowd. So you have a lot of people in Black America who are following the crowd, whatever that crowd happens to be. They're following it, and nobody asks any questions. Nobody say, "Okay, where are we going? Why are we going this way? What do we want? And more importantly, why do we want it?" So we see the division at home. There, and you always say this, and I wholeheartedly agree. There aren't enough married men speaking on this, and one of the reasons married men aren't speaking on this is because they're getting some pushback from men in in the red pill community saying, "Well, marriage is not the thing for men to aspire to be."
Why do you think that
Well,
is?
because for some people it's about the money. They want to keep the gender war alive. Me, I'm on the other side of that spectrum, and this is what we do on our podcast. We talk about solutions. So for me, if you're only talking about a problem and you're not offering up solutions, I don't have time to sit and chat with you. I'm just like, at the end of the day, we're not going the same way. This car reads solutions. You talking about problems. You talking about money. There is money in a solution, provided that the solution that's being offered functions. What people don't understand is this: at the root of every relationship is the two individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get two individuals and they're not like minded, no solution is going to work. So, in order for a solution to work, people have to know themselves at a base level. And the first thing that a lot of people do not want to do is acknowledge who they are. They don't want to not acknowledge that they have shortcomings, that they have habits that turn people off, that they are a terrible mate, whether your gender is male or female. And when you don't acknowledge the realities of who you are never going to be able to come clean and connect cleanly with the individual that's sitting across from you. And when you can't do that, you're always going to have strife in your life. That goes from family, friends, work, even people you walk down the street with. This is why you find a lot of brothers that get into fights over silly stuff because they don't realize that they're silly in nature. They're silly, and it takes that type of thing to trigger them. And it's, yo, man, you stepped on my space. No, man, I'm sorry. It wasn't intentional. No, man, and it's the provider that gets them, and they don't realize that they have to control what's in them
Who do
because
you think is more susceptible to red pill content? Because you work in education too, don't you?
I've done some volunteer. Anyone who has had a negative outcome with a female. So that could be that, and this is where when the clip you just show the brother's absolutely correct. If I'm a 45-year-old man, I married a single mother. She had two kids. I swear up and down I love her. I've done everything I could for her. Her children moved her into my house, and now she's divorcing me and found out she's been messing with one of the kids' fathers. Oh, I'm pissed. Now, some people would say you should have known better than to marry a single mother with kids by another man. He's following his heart. He was doing what he was taught was the righteous thing to do. And that's the first problem, is that a lot of these young men who come down this road, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go. You go ahead. I was gonna wait. I was gonna ask you to unpack that. You know,
A lot of young men who come down this road who hit that path, they've never had anybody to pull them aside and say, "Hey, what is it that you want long term with this woman? And is she going to be on your page, reading from your book?" Because this is what Kevin Samuels used to always tell the women who were coming in with children looking for a high value man. Is he going to be able to discipline your children? Is he going to be able to do this with your children? Are you going to relinquish full control of your life to him since he's taking up the vast majority of living expenses and everything associated with that? And a lot of women would say, no, he can't do that. But you find one of these men who's labeled as a simp who does that and he falls out. Now he needs somewhere to turn to that's either going to straighten him out or validates how he feels. And that's when a lot of these men stumble into the red pill. And when they do, what they call this function of being is red pill rage, because that's where they are. They are in a rage over the situation that this female has put them through, whether it was intentional or unintentional.
mm-hmm.
So that's their first foray in the red pill rage. They don't get the closure that they need. And this is where a lot of women say, well, who hurt you? Some woman did. It's
Mm-hmm.
not obvious. Some woman put some dude to the ringer, and now he's pissed, and now he's trying to seek retribution, which is the wrong thing to do.
Gotcha.
Anytime that somebody's hurt or somebody's offended, what they need to do is understand their healing process. Get away from everything and say, okay, you know what? What did I learn from this situation? How did this situation hurt me? And how can I recover from this situation to be a better person than what I was when I went in, and not to make the same mistake again? Unfortunately, some men never learn that. And they keep making that same mistake and they keep making that same mistake. And then they think, well, women are the same. It's just like, no, you have to change your criteria. Your selection process has to get better. Your vetting process has to get better. And when you do that, you'll understand it. Because I went through it myself. I was 29. In my 20s, I had a period of time where I was being accused of fathering children that weren't mine. I had to look at myself in the mirror. I said, in every situation with these women, I said, I'm the common denominator. And I had to ask, what is it about these women that I'm drawn to? And I had to sit down and I had to really ask myself that question. And I
So
said, you know what? Go ahead.
when when you came to that and you started talking about yourself,
Mhm.
what about you do you believe drew you to those women?
My mother, my mother, and needing to, I don't want to say fix, but needing to address her shortcomings. In other words, my mother was poorly educated. My mother didn't have a lot of money. My mother was very promiscuous. So it would be those things in certain women that I dealt with that I was trying to fix. And we call that playing Captain Satan. So when I realized, I said, I can't do that anymore. I said, I can't keep chasing after women that are broken, unhealed, not whole, and then pouring into them and not getting anything back other than some trumped up charge about being a father of a child, or because I didn't never got hurt, but the accusations of being a father of a child and having to jump through those hoops and go through that ring, I was like, I don't. I'm not that type of dude. That ain't cool. Because any female that I've been with, whether I'm dating or we just having casual sex, I've always been there. So if something happened, you don't have to track me down. All you got to do is call me and say, look, this is the situation, and I'm there. We're going to deal with the situation like adults. The
Mm-hmm.
problem was this: I got involved with the women who didn't want that situation dealt with. What they wanted was the chaos. And I said, nah, I can't function in chaos. That's not my life. So from the age of 30 to 37, I did not date. I was not involved in any woman. I call it my Shawshank Redemption moment, where Andy Dufresne, the people familiar with the movie, where Andy Dufresne had to crawl through the waste tube to get out in freedom. And ever since then, I've been okay with the decisions I've made with dating. But a lot of people aren't going to go through that because it's painful. And at the and for me, relatively speaking, 7 years was a drop in the bucket. But I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about women, what they disguise, what they won't tell you, and what you will find out if you just sit around, pay attention, and ask poignant questions. A lot of men will not ask certain questions of women because they're afraid they'll run them away. And for some men, and you always say this, they're driven by sex. If they can get it, they don't care how it comes.
Yeah. Would you
They don't
say
care what shit come along with it.
on a scale of 1 to 10, well, how well, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, because you already kind of described a little bit about your childhood and how you was raised. At what
Mhm.
point, like I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, at your most promiscuous, what would you grade yourself at? Or did you have a
And eight,
promiscuous period in your life?
no, eight,
Okay. And how long did you?
at an eight. I mean, when I got into a relationship, it was just me and that female. But there are times when I wasn't in a relationship where I was stick and move, stick and move. So when a situation happened, it didn't surprise me. I was like, oh no, it ain't my child. I like the possibility exists because her and I slept together.
Hmm.
So I was always, brought up to be um, aware of my own actions and to say, hey, look, I was there, I did it, I got to own up to it. But I'm not going to own up to something that I had nothing to do with. Now, my mama raised me to be cool. She didn't raise me to be no damn fool. And
Understood.
and in that, a lot of men they'll run from that because they've never been taught to stand in whatever it is that they've done, good, bad, or indifferent. So if you give a man who doesn't have a backbone the opportunity to run, he's running. And that's why you have all these women who now have the opportunity to say that the black men are destroying the family into a degree that is not an inaccurate statement. The only problem was two people getting together having sex and creating a child is not a family. A family, by definition, at least as far as I'm concerned, is a man and woman who get together under the covenant, married, and then bring a child forth. Otherwise, you just out there having sex and you producing children irresponsibly. But that's just me, and that might piss some people off. But hey, don't look at me because I'm not there creating children. Like I said, I have none. I'm out here trying to set paths, give these kids some directions. Say, hey, look, you don't have to do what your parents did. You have the
Hmm.
ability to make your own path in life. And that was always a covenant I kept with myself. I said, if I produce any children out of wedlock, I'm going to stop dating until that child becomes of age to be able to do for themselves and then go out into the world. And then I will start dating again. A lot of people aren't going to do that. They're not going to self-sacrifice their
Yeah,
freedom
that's true.
for the benefit of their child.
Well, a little bit about myself, because you see all my content in the way I've kind of like nailed down for some very specific things based on behavior. Nobody can run from behavior, you know, and it's not that many choices a human being can make, but when it comes down to relationships, you
Mhm.
know, so when I nail down this red pill following, the people that actually subscribe to the red pill and kind of like live by it, I started thinking about it like, okay, what's the dichotomy of the feminist movement, right?
Mhm.
Everybody has a some sort of profile about the behavior and the choices and the language that women that subscribe to feminism, what I'm saying, use. And the red pill content is the same thing.
Mhm.
Um and and in that, um you're one of the unique I guess examples that you don't have to live a sexually reckless life,
Yeah.
because despite the way that you came up, and like you said, your mom was promiscuous. I don't You haven't mentioned much about your dad. I don't know much about.
Never met my father.
Never met your father.
Never
So
met my father.
um And did you know what you was missing from your father when you were younger, or did you figure that out when you got older?
You know, as odd as this is going to sound, I spent a lot of time of my youth in foster care. So while I never had a biological father, I've always had men of means, especially I call this a pivotal time in my life. So from the time that I was 8 till about 12, I lived in a small little hamlet off the coast of Lake Ontario in Alcott. I lived out there with a married couple. They had 5 kids. The father, Fred Jefferson, may he rest in peace and bless his family. That man taught me everything I know sitting here right now about how to be a responsible man, how to be a man that can do things with his hands, how to be a man that can build, and more importantly, what it meant to actually be there for a family.
Hmm.
And I remember he used to work for Napa, got laid off. I didn't know you could. I didn't know you could lose a job by being laid off. I'm 19 years old. Now he had a small business that he ran out of his garage. Built the garage itself from the foundation up, poured the concrete, did the electrical work, all of that. I'd never seen a black man that could do that before. So I was impressed off of the muscle. Pull car engines, fix lawnmowers, all of that stuff. I learned how to do like I replaced the garage on my roof. I knew to do all that from him. So it was by virtue of being around men like that in foster homes that allowed me to have some semblance of what a man should do. But back to when he lost his job, he went to pouring blacktop before they had the machines that do it. I'm talking wheelbarrows, digging it up with shovels and laying it.
Yeah, all labor,
Yes,
muscle and
that's
grunt.
yeah. That's when I understood what it was to be a man who produces for his family, no matter what. I've never forgotten that lesson. But we as black men, we don't get to see that often. What we hear about, and you were talking about this, the young man was talking about this earlier, is the messages that are being pushed. We don't hear about hard work. We don't hear about putting your hands in some mud and I know this is an overused term, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Not everyone is going to do that. I understand that. But for those of us who can, we need to, because more so now than ever, there are some young men out there who will see what you're doing and they're gonna ask, why do you do that? Why do you do that when you can just go out here and do this and do that? Because they don't understand that the long one is always safer. It's always better and it's more proven and wise than the short money. The movie First Time Felon with Omar Epps, that becomes plain. But a lot of brothers are getting caught up in the system before they actually even get a chance to start living.
Yeah,
I was fortunate. I had a brother who did at one time 16 years behind the drug game. So I saw it firsthand. There's nobody that can tell me anything about the drug game that I don't know. But I never got involved in that. Now, whether it was my personality or just not not inclined to do that, I just never did. I hung out with cats that small. I hung out with cats that carry, but it was never in my personality. I didn't have my first drink of alcohol till I was 24. I didn't have my first hangover till I was 31. So there are certain things that are embedded in us that if we allow them to grow and we nurture them, they're going to direct us away from trouble. We just don't have a
well,
lot of people that encourage it. And because we
that
don't,
that's
this is what you
that's a
see
good
now.
that's a good point out right there, because even in the absence of consistent male presence, um, and even being raised by your mother, despite whatever her behaviors were, you still didn't have that affinity or that attraction to alcohol, drugs, or any sustained negative behavior. What where do you think, like, beyond just believing it is a a genetic or a psychological embed that doesn't attract you to those things, what do you attribute to staying out of that? And I'm gonna assume your mom has a lot to do with that, right?
Well, credit to my mother. My
Yeah.
mother never drank alcohol. She never used drugs. So while some other foundations may have been questionable, at least for me, I didn't see that at home.
Yeah.
Now my um paternal aunt, she smoked cigarettes, but that was about the worst thing I've ever saw as a kid was people smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
I had older brothers that smoked weed, but they never pushed it on us. They never said, you got to do this, you got to do no. We were we were all strong personality types. There was 11 kids my mother bore. One has already predeceased me. So we were all strong willed. We were all allowed to make our own errors, find our own way. That was one thing that we would never not permitted to do. Double negative, pardon me. So in that, you know, you had one of my brothers that would do this, one of my brothers that would do that, and none of us ever really got into anything other than smoking weed. I mean, even to this extent now, that's the worst drug that anybody in my family does. But if we go back to the '70s and
Yeah,
and,
that's not a negative thing though. Like
right,
so like today I really want to focus on like the behaviors that are embedded that track and then kind of like lead people to choosing to align themselves more with red pill content, you know. So with that was kind of like a snapshot of the way that you were brought up, you know. And and if you don't mind, you could cut me off whenever you need
yeah,
to.
right.
What type of circumstances was your mother born into that produced her behavior that you would say?
Ooh, now that I can't answer because my mother had me when she was in her late 30s, so I couldn't tell you anything about my grandparents. But what I can say is my mother came from a time and generation where it wasn't taboo to have a lot of kids. Now, unfortunately, my mother had the equivalent of a sixth grade education, so she didn't. She never really practiced anything. Like I said, it was.
And the other question is too, where are you in the birth order?
I am number nine.
Oh man.
I have a younger brother, and like I said, the youngest sibling was my sister. She
How old and how
predeceased me
old
a
was
couple
she?
of years.
How old was she when she had her first child?
My oldest sister is 72, so I think my mother was like 17, 18. So my mother was very young.
Okay.
So yeah, you're looking at the time period. It wasn't uncommon for some black women in general to have those kind of kids or kids at that age and in that number. I never questioned it. Well, why am I going to question what my mother's a grown woman? Why am I going to question what she's doing? And it wasn't until I got of age
Mm-hmm.
that I realized, my mother's out here, literally having. Hey, I always tell people,
Tell us.
embrace the truth,
Yep.
because this you're asking where the red pill comes from. I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give it to you raw.
Yeah.
My mother was out here. She was getting it in.
Yeah.
She was getting it in,
Did she come
and
from a parent or a single parent home?
I can't say. I would love to. But like I said, it was never something I sat down and asked. And by her sexual behavior, I would probably say yes. Now I know this is going to offend some people. If you want the
Say
truth,
what you got to say. What you got to say, brother.
yeah. If you want the truth, you got to be open to all facets of the truth. So
Correct.
I acknowledge my mother for the woman who gave birth to me. I acknowledge my mother for all the things she did that females do. So when guys walk around and they say, "Well, women are sleeping with this man, this man, this man, this man, and this man," I look at my life and I say, I see no lies. My mother did it. I know I have my share of women. I know some women who slept around. So is there any validity in what is coming from the red pill community in that terms? Yes. Now, is that applicable to everybody? No. Now, I know when I was 19, 20, I wasn't the most attractive guy in my group. I wasn't getting the most girls in my group. Hell, I had some friends that was knocking out two or three chicks a week.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, is there any validity that women sleep around? Mhm. Is there any validity to women uh, trying to pin kids on other men? How do I know that? I've been a part of it. See, a lot of people they want to run from the truth, and in running from the truth, you keep running, you keep running, you keep running until you run into something else that's the truth on another end, and then you run back the other way, and all of a sudden now you're surrounded by all these things you don't ran from, as opposed to sitting down there and dealing with them one by one and saying, you know what, I know some elements of this, I know some people who do this, I know some people who do this, I know some people who do this, because people they misunderstand the red pill, and when they hear it, they think it's anti-female. The red pill is nothing more than an ideology, and simply put, the red pill is just going to allow you to understand how women think and move in terms of heterosexual relationships. Nothing more,
Okay.
nothing less.
Okay. So at that point, right?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Um, I wanna ask. I'm trying to ask the right, use the right terminology. The So would you say that the majority of the red pill community is fatherless, like the feminist community? Would that be too far to say?
That would be hard to answer only because you get some men that come into red pill understanding, they get what they need and they leave and they go better themselves. And then you get some men who stay there and they bask in it. Those are the ones who are centered on the gender war, and they don't want a resolution because they want to hurt somebody. They don't want to heal. They want to cause pain, mischief, and chaos. And those are the men I always say. Those are the ones you have to identify and you have to stay away from because they don't mean anybody any good. All they want to do is harm. I don't consider myself to be in that realm of the red pill. I walk around with red pill knowledge, yes, but I'm not out here trying to hurt people. And so if I see somebody in a situation and I can identify what they're going through, I'm going to ask them some questions because I already know what it is that they're dealing with. The first thing I'm going to ask them is, why do you behave like that? Because there's a foundation that goes along with the red pill.
Hmm.
But most people won't address that. They
Yeah,
just want to be there.
and that's what I'm getting at. Like the foundation of it.
Mhm,
Like, okay, strip away the failed relationships, strip
mhm,
away, you know, well, and before I get there too, because I'm stripping certain things away as we
mhm.
go. When it comes to you, would you say the majority of the women that you had romantic connection with were they already single mothers, and were they raised similar to you, or how many women did you out of your last five relationships? How many of those men? How many of those women had their fathers in their lives?
My, I will answer that question like this. The last five relationships I had actually, even though they didn't result in marriage, the last five women that I've dealt with in terms of relationships, they were good. That's
Did
because
they
I
have,
selected better.
but did they have their fathers in their life? I'm
No, no, no,
okay.
no. Yeah, I was going to answer that. They didn't. Now, I want people to understand that just because an individual does not or didn't have their father in their life does not mean they're not capable of making the
Of course.
decisions. That's where the red pill should aid men. But in order for it to aid the man, he has to understand the role that he's playing in it. You have some men that will not acknowledge that. Just like I said, I was picking women that mimic my mother. I recognize the flaw in myself. So if I don't recognize the flaw in myself, then nothing else is going to matter.
I think that's important to say. For sure, because everything works from within self. You got to do some source work,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's the opposite. That's why I say the red pill and the feminist community have similar characteristics in terms of
Oh, yeah.
dealing with
Yeah.
the absence of compatibility and and empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
but I don't believe that a lot of men well, I believe that a lot of men that follow the red pill community were raised without fathers, and then later on they figure out the tenets that it takes to just become a more situationally aware man of where his obstacles are. I think it's like there are things that you're when you have a father in your life that he's just gonna tell you. You know what I'm saying? That he's
Correct.
just right to. If he's got a spine and if he cares about, we talk about all things considered done in good faith. You know what I'm saying? He's gonna discipline you. He's gonna, you know what I'm saying, teach you things just because it's just in a man's spirit to teach, lead, and and be part of something bigger than himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be able to keep people from making mistakes as they go, especially unnecessary mistakes that have already been proven to be not in your favor, right? But
Mm-hmm.
on the feminist side, a lot of the women that describe to the independent, ideology that goes along with it, I believe that a lot of those women do not have good relationships with their fathers, if at all,
Right.
and the constant reinforcement of that same thought or proof of concept comes from their mothers who were raised the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So by the time that you have, multiple kids involved, and sometimes, and especially even more with multiple fathers, the and then never cohabitating with a man, never being around a man, all only you only see men as well. I get the idea that they only see men as utility, you know,
Yes.
um, because I'm a like they just call all men providers, and I don't believe that all men are providers. I believe
No.
husbands and fathers are the only providers. Everybody
Right.
else is just in it for themselves,
Yeah.
because if you're not married to the woman, the only women that you owe protection to is probably your mother or your daughter. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
And
Mm-hmm.
so like, you can't just be running around here saying that you're a provider. And there's a lot of people using terminology that definitely sets up toxic relationships because you're boxing
Right.
yourself into some title that's already out there. So what I'm trying to do is isolate
Yeah. It has.
process of elimination, pretty much. Because like, what were your relationships
Mm,
like
it
when
does. Let me jump in here for a moment.
yeah, go ahead.
But and Garrett asked a question that I want to bring into here because I
Yeah,
think it's often overlooked.
yep.
I'm not a provider, and Victor said why? Because I have nobody to provide for other than myself. So when
Understood.
people talk about men in certain categories, no, I'm not a provider. Am I a protector? To a degree. If something's happening in my neighborhood, I'm going to step out and make sure my neighborhood's good. If something's happening to somebody who I think is disadvantaged of, I'm going to try and make sure that person's protected. So in that realm, yes, I am a protector. Now, Garrett asked, and it's a very poignant question. Why do you think what you are, or the reason for men leaving the church is as of late? And this feeds in to why a lot of black men go into the red pill. It's because they're raised in a church that feeds the female imperative. In other words, it feeds into an aspect of feminism. It tells men that, hey, get out here and take care of these kids by other men. That's what you should be doing. It's no longer the fire and brimstone where the church preaches chastity, preaches virginity to women. Don't bring that in here. No, and me and mostly because the church is fed by female dollars. Shout out to Dr. Umar. I love what Dr. Umar is doing in terms of separating the genders in terms of education. But we have to understand what drives the black community and the black community is built on. The black community is not built on men. It's built on women. We just happen to be the protectors of it. And when people understand that, they say, well, why is that? Because that's how it's always been. Black men have never, and understand what I mean when I say the term never. That means very rarely. So black men have never been the directors of things in their own home. If the conditions weren't correct for the mother in the slave household, The slave master deferred to her. People like to decry that the Willie Lynch letter is not authentic. And you know what? I'll grant you that. But we sure as hell can't debate the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, like, I believe the Willie Lynch letter was one of the greatest psyops ever
Mhm.
because whether it was a hoax or not, it still produced the outcomes that
Right.
reflected it. And and truthfully, it was like, in my opinion, the script to Black Fatigue, if you
Hmm.
really think about it,
Hmm.
because everything in there describes the current condition now. So now, beyond, so that's why I titled my show Beyond the Algorithm, right?
Yeah.
Because on the algorithm, everybody's got an echo chamber
Hmm.
of some sorts, and whether they create it or by what they contribute to it,
Hmm.
or whether they are in the echo chamber and only consuming certain information,
Right.
because some people are creators and some people are consumers. So when I think about the massive psychological impact of history as it's been recorded and how it's being interpreted, you know, it starts really spiraling into something that is a lot more radical than what we think.
Hmm.
Um, and I do believe that there's a matriarchal split in the community because there's a large demographic of people that have been raised without a father. Now,
Yeah.
but but to go back and not even to push back or whatever, but to take into consideration when you said that the household was definitely led by women, would you say that that was even still the case when black people were married in the 50s at an 80% rate?
What I would say is this: the conditions for the black household had to be suitable for the white. In the movie Fences, whether you look at the one uh, done by Denzel or James Earl Jones, when he came home with the paycheck, she was given a paycheck. He was given some money to go out and drink or whatever it was he does. But in terms of the household decisions, what was bought, what was cooked, or things, all those decisions were the privy of the female. This is something that Sister Sherazad Ali understood and discovered when she was writing her book. She said the man is just there in terms of providing. That's his responsibility to his wife and to his children. He don't get to say where they, live at. He don't have any say in how that household is run. If
That's a
she
u-
wants
that's
this,
a utilitarian idea I was talking about before. So you kind of
mhm,
echoing that right now. Like
mhm,
he's supposed like it's a luxury if you have a loving father.
right. And that part right there was illustrated when his son came home and he wanted to play football, and the mother was saying, "Let him go to practice." He said he's not going to practice; he's going to work because he was trying to instill in his son that you are going to have to work first, play second. There is no time for you to do all these things that you want to do. This is why women talk about men sharing their feelings. That's fine and dandy if you have the time and opportunity. Most men don't. We
Hmm.
talk about something else is coming out of the red pill community is to talk about 50-50. Now, if a man's not going to pay 100% of the cost, then you don't need to be with him. There's very few men on this planet, especially in Western cultures, that pays 100%. This country was never set up like that, especially after World War II. If you go back and you look at the demographics after World War II, a lot of women were in the labor force.
Yep.
All black women were in the labor force. There was no such thing as a stay-at-home wife in the black community. That didn't exist.
Yeah, you're right about that.
So when black women are talking about, I want a man that pays this, goes out buy me a Birkin bag and gets me the latest G wagon, and I'm, where did you come from? Because your mother didn't benefit from that, and your grandmother didn't benefit from that. Even though we as a group we have a 1.4 dollar purchasing power, we don't use it collectively. That's frittered away on a whole lot of nonsense that doesn't empower us. This is why Dr. Claude Anderson talked about his book, The Powernomics. And if you haven't If you don't know about it, you haven't read it, please pick up a copy and avail yourself to it. But these are all the things that lead men to the red pill because they feel like they're being abused and misused, and they want to say, "Well, where's the love?" The first person you got to show love to is yourself, because if you're showing love to yourself, guess what you're telling everybody else that comes around? You're number one. You're number one. You're number two. You're number three. Now, in that, if you're a man about your business and your affairs, anybody that comes into your fold, they by default are going to reap the benefits of you putting yourself number one, because your mindset is not going to allow anything that's associated with you to fall.
Right.
Case in point, if I start dating a female right now and she comes into my fold, she's going to get everything that I have. Why? Because she's a part of me now. So I want her to not only be a part of me physically, mentally, but I also want her to be a part of me financially. This is why I only deal with women on a certain level. I own a home. She has to at least have a place of her own, whether she's renting or paying a mortgage. I don't have any kids under my roof. Now, if she's a single mother, that's cool. She just can't have any kids under her roof that are under her control. These are my stipulations. They're non-negotiable. I don't hang out and drink. She can drink, but she ain't hanging out. On the weekends, I'm at work. If these things she don't want to abide by, whew, I see. We can talk to each other, but there's going to be nothing else other than that.
Misconception that
they can't do. They don't have it in them to tell a woman bye. Why? Because they're too interested in getting between her legs. And when that happens, they're screwed, for lack of a better term. And now they're saying, well, man, I like this chick so much. Do you like her, or do you like yourself more? If you like yourself more, the outcome is or the decision making is easy, and the easy decision making leads to easy outcomes. No stress, not all that nonsense. You ain't got to worry about having multiple kids by multiple women and what she's doing, how she might be trying to set you up with another dude because she wants you back, but she's trying to use him as bait. These are all the things that the red pill teaches. Like you said, a father would have taught you that. Hey, look, because we were told as kids, as young boys, hey, look, we were told by our mothers, you don't want no ready-made family. That was red pill knowledge right there that was being told to us by our mothers.
A lot of the stuff that people think is red pill to me is just common sense, though. You know, but that's because when you grow up in a household that's already structured, you know, then you don't have to have certain conversations. But like once you go out in the world and you have a different experience than what your parents had, then you understand how that can happen too. Let me play this clip real quick.
Yes.
it's only black men that are having these conversations or are frustrated with their women. It's absolutely 100% false. I've seen white men with way larger podcast numbers than any black content creator talking about the same talking points about women ain't this, that, and the third. The manosphere itself, the concept of the manosphere, the red pill, started with white men. People, white men have created that space. And it's just black men have the last couple of years started to get into that.
So I'm going to give this brother credit for being open and transparent and admitting that manosphere and red pill was coined and founded by white men. Only for a lot of black men, unfortunately, to pick up that mantle and continue the legacy of red pill to oppress their own demographic of women. And a lot of you black men, the thing that makes me cringe and makes me angry from time to time is a lot of you with this regurgitated talking point sounding like Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate. You sound like racist, elitist, white supremacist men in blackface. That's what a lot of you black men sound like, that have adopted this whole manosphere, MGTOW, red pill ideology, using that to oppress your own demographic of women. Black women already got a lot of roadblocks and hurdles in front of them that they got to overcome. Congratulations, becoming another roadblock. Did you know black women are already discriminated against because of workplace biases? Okay, the texture of their hair, whether it's natural or not, or how it's done. Colorism issues. What shade of black or brown are they? The medical malpractice industry. Did you know that black women are 3 times likely to die during childbirth, giving birth to your son or to your daughter? due to medical malpractice and piss poor treatment from doctors and nurses that don't want to listen. They're 3 times higher, the mortality rate, versus any other demographic of women. Did you know that there's over 100,000 black women right now missing off the face of this earth, never to be seen again? Who's fighting to bring them home? Okay? Did you know one of the leading causes of death of black women, in between the ages of 15 and 45, domestic violence? Does society care? No, they don't. Who needs racism and white supremacy when you have black men that'll pick up the mantle and oppress their own demographic of women with red pill and manosphere? Trolling black women for being single moms without knowing their story. You know, trolling women if they don't have kids and they're not married by a certain age. Oh man, something wrong with you. Ha ha. You hit the wall. Trolling women, shaming women for their success. You know, and it's just like the CIA I think the CIA dropped off podcast equipment in black neighborhoods and the wrong type of Negroes got a hold of it. Ooh, I got a podcast microphone. I got some audio out of this. Let me get on YouTube and oppress my own group of women. That's what y'all doing.
What
it was a good clip. It was a good clip, but the thing I'm gonna break it down. Everyone has a voice. What an individual does with that voice determines whether they're good or bad. Black men have never been able to oppress anything other than their sex drive. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, yeah, he's what we call in the black manosphere, he's what we call a panda bear. He's pandering to women for clicks and likes. It's just like if you're going to be honest about what the black manosphere does, then be honest about it. The reason why he said 100,000 black women are missing is because the decisions that women are making, who they have children with. 51% of black men in this country don't have children. Why? Because we were never pre-selected. Shout out to Ron Wills. Ron Wills talked about pre-selection in men. When the young brothers was coming up through high school, especially those who was grinding, were looked at as nerds, geeks. Females weren't checking them out. They were checking out the cat that was pushing. And I have my own story about that when I was in 11th grade. Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that in a moment. In 11th grade, I was working. I happened to be working 30 hours a week. I was wearing the same clothing that the dope was wearing. I had a young female, pretty attractive, come up to me. She said, "Herbert, are you hustling?"
We got to tighten up your audio.
She said, "Are you hustling?" I said, "Oh."
We need to tighten up the audio. I think your microphone is around kind of a lot, scratching you up pretty good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, you sound good. We just get some feedback.
Okay. What about now?
Way better.
Okay. The earpiece. I had a young female came up to me. She said, "Are you hustling?" I said, "Hustling? What do you mean?" She said, "Selling dope." I said, "No, I work." She said, "Oh," turned around and walked away. This was in the 11th grade. I was 18 years old. At that point in my young life, I saw the writing on the wall. And it was, if you're not living a certain lifestyle, you are not doing certain things, you're not going to be attractive to the average black woman. That still holds true till this day. That's why in the song The Vapors, when Bismarck said, "Baby, please, you work for UPS," that was the message that was being sent out. And it was being undergirded by the rap lyrics, entertainment, that you had to have this kind of car, you had to have this kind of job, or you had to be doing this kind of activity to even really be considered viable for most black women. So when these black women decided to start having kids, especially when the crack era hit around the 1990s.
How old are you?
I'm 53.
53. Okay, yeah, because you're older than me, so I'm listening to, you know what I'm saying, like a griot, the guys that's older than me, you know.
Yeah. Man, I listen to people that know far more in a way about this than I do. So I get my information direct from the source. There's a gentleman that I listen to. He goes by the name of Black Gnostic Speaks, BGS. He has a plethora of information regarding this, the crack era, and he breaks down all manners of things. I would advise anyone who is interested in learning about Black history in terms of economics and red pills and things of that matter to go and just take in his catalog. You don't have to agree with it. Just listen for the information. If you get nothing else from what I've said in this podcast, please do that. So I remember, man, when it hit, and there were people who you never thought, and I mean never thought would get caught up in the stuff, and they were doing all kinds of things. I mean, just unspeakable things, and you had to ask yourself then, the worst thing that we ever saw was weed. Weed ain't never had nobody letting somebody use their car driving around the community, just beating it up and just doing all kinds of things. We never had nobody performing oral sex in the middle of an abandoned building. It was horrible. So when you look at all the things that came out of that era, multiple women with multiple kids by multiple men, it was the traffickers who had all those kids. Men like myself, we can see no parts of the panties. Why? We ain't had the money. We ain't had the cars. We didn't have that lifestyle. And that's what the women were looking for. They weren't looking for the steady eddies. They weren't looking for the men who potentially they could have married, had kids, had a nice home. Like I said, Black community, the black home was always a two income family. Rarely was it one, because there were laws set up against that. I can't remember the state. I want to say it was South Carolina, where when men were working, they could afford to have the wife stay at home. They made legislation that said if a Black woman wasn't working, she'd be taken to jail.
Mm.
Yeah. And I don't quote me on the state, but I do know it was in the South. So when people talk about all this stuff, I'm like, are you speaking from the standpoint with actual knowledge, or are you speculating? This is why I always tell people I don't have a problem with somebody saying something negative about the red pill, because it can fit, but it's got to fit with a certain content creator, because there are certain content creators who don't want to see it into it, because that means an inch of their money, because they're a one-trick pony. They can't talk to you about anything else. They can't talk to you about stocks. They can't talk to you about finances. They can't talk to you about anything else other than the dysfunction of the Black, and more specifically the Black woman. There was something else that the brother said, that the one brother said in the clip that was actually accurate. We were talking about the origin of the manosphere, but I'm going to go back a little bit to Tom Likas. Tom Likas was a DJ, a radio show host in Los Angeles around the 1980s.
I remember
He used
him.
to talk about this stuff.
Yep.
So when people talk about Black men and this and that, I'm like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. Tommy Sotomayor. What is Tommy Sotomayor famous for? Banging on Black women and the things that they did to mess up his life, to make him look at Black women the way he does. So these are not one-off isolated events. These are things that people don't know about, because they say, oh, you know what? I forgot about him. Oh, I forgot about him. The skit that. Go ahead.
And that feeds what I'm saying. The guys that have been heavily invested in putting out their takes based on red pill content, most of them have been in negative relationships with Black women within their own lives. You know, that's the start point. And it makes it difficult for a conversation to be had, especially online, about Black men actually being empathetic to Black women, because you take a guy that's been raised with sisters, his spectrum for understanding women is markedly different than somebody that's been raised by just his mother or without sisters. Like I didn't have any sisters, right? So the that's why I was saying earlier about I can't understand the negative vitriol. I can understand why people are attracted to it. But I'm like, well, which people are most attracted to that type of content? And it's generally speaking, it's going to be men that's been raised by women.
Yeah.
And had negative relationships with the women that raised them.
Yeah, absolutely.
More so than just negative dating experiences.
Yeah.
Because there's tiers to how extreme a person would be, when it comes down to it. Because like I don't have like nobody's parents is perfect, even if they got them, right? But if you've had, parents that have been equitable enough in the relationship space, with their fathers and everything, the spectrum of how they communicate with women changes also, because
yes,
that is what I'm talking about when it comes down to it. Because I do believe, for the most part, that despite whatever men and women have a beef about right now, socially speaking, as far as the internet is concerned, and however it plays out in regular life, I believe that most of the red pill content is the product is comprised of a bunch of sons that were raised by a single mother that didn't treat them right,
yeah.
because I hear plenty of stories that I just cannot relate to, because my mom's a pretty good mom, you know what I'm saying, for the most part. I saw respectful communication between my parents, and so when I look at the relationship space and what men are attracted to in terms of like the attributes that a woman may have, a lot of them lean on, the attributes that their mother raised them with, and if they, or whether they relate to women at all, and they choose to date same sex too, because that has a huge impact as well, because that's a whole nother tier to it. And if you think about like the way life is being articulated through music and art and entertainment, down to your shows, where your reality TV shows where girls are beating each other up and fighting each other as part of it.
Yeah.
Those women ain't coming from 2-parent households for the most part.
No,
I know
not.
they're not. Yeah. Because it's not uncommon to see a household full of women, raising each other and having conflict with women throughout. They have the same conflicts with women that the men raised by women have with women.
Yep.
So that's why I said the red pill and the feminism groups, they all come from the same situation. They all part of the dissatisfied dating pool, because in most part, when the conversation evolves or progresses to what they think marriage is, you can listen to them and say marriage ain't nothing but a piece of paper. It's not that serious.
Right.
It's not, but it is if you come from a 2-parent home. It is if you grew up seeing healthy, cohabitation between husband and wife, because you're less likely to be attracted to someone that didn't grow up the same way as you.
Right.
So it's a lot of trauma bonding is what I see. I see the red pill community. The loudest voices are the ones that have trauma bonded with other men that have the same complaints about women. So
yeah, it's going to remain like that.
Of course, it's always going to be that way. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that how can we have a conversation that involves the protection of Black women without sounding like a pander, a panda bear, pretty much? Because there's a hard line right there, because there's a lot more angry, loud voices than there are reasonable voices that want to bridge the gap. I don't know if it can be done on social media, of course, but it's just worth having a question.
Whoa. Okay. Wow. Can it be done on social media? Yes, but it has to be exclusionary. And what I mean by that is this.
Yeah, break it down. Let me hear this.
It's gotta be men like us.
Okay.
Who are stood fast in what we believe. We're stood fast in that Women need to be protected. We offer that protection. But the second part and the most vital part is going to have nothing to do with us. It's going to have everything to do with the women. And that question is she going to yield to our direction? Period. Because we, by virtue of the men that we allow in, is going to be similar to what the Nation of Islam does. There's going to be rules set forth, and every man here is going to abide by those rules. Period. If you don't, you're not in. There's no gray area. This is the fortress walls we set up. Any woman coming inside this fortress walls is going to have to adhere to these rules. For within those fortress walls, we can go back quasi, because we don't want to deprive the women of the right to choose. We want to give these women the ability to choose the kind of man that they want. So if you want a man that's studious, hardworking, we're gonna have certain things set up for these men when they come through as pubescent kids. We're gonna put them in school. We're gonna direct them. Mm-hmm. Either you go to college, you go to military, or you get a trade. But when you come out on the other side of 25, you're gonna be a fully actualized man that understands what your job is, what your responsibility is to the Black community and to a potential wife that you select. Once we do those things, everything else is going to fall in. Now, what that's going to require ultimately is a separation from Black men and niggas.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, and look, and that made me think about this topic, in this detail, because red pill fatigue, anything with fatigue on it is really labeled behind something that we want to be done with, right? Uh-huh. And unfortunately, because you lead from within, right? Mm-hmm. You lead with how you think, and then your actions and stuff kind of go along. They follow that. If it's done, you could tell the difference between somebody doing something righteously and self-righteously, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, the content creators that make too much money off of, this, they are part of a process that is going to keep the engine going, because it's mm-hmm. too much money on the table, right? Mm-hmm. And I look at it all as prosperity preaching.
Yeah,
it's literally no different. It's just another spin. You get to play on people's emotions, and it doesn't have any problem solving in it, other than just the canned solutions of, you come over here, you go to the gym and it'll fix everything, versus helping guys understand why they were on that path. Because what I also see is the hypocrisy in talking crazy to women that you're not attracted to.
Yeah.
And no matter how you slice that, like, there's a lot of fatigue that goes along in that. And yeah. When you start really like breaking down, like, man, you know what, man, you guys are angry at women that you're not attracted to. And I don't understand that, and so because I didn't understand it, I kept, doing my digging, and I actually put together some clips of like justifying or just trying to present some kind of example of why and what it looks like, because my entire take on things as it pertains to, I did some thinking on this. Hold on, and I'm gonna play this in a second, but mm-hmm. like my take on this is about argumentative men, right? Because this is where we are, and I don't care who gets offended by this, but I never do anyway. But I want to, I want to put my spin on it as publicly as possible, right? And I want this part to be heard, because this is important. I came up with this. I believe that men that have a need to argue with women have a humiliation kink. They want to be dominated sexually by disrespectful women. Nothing says a man wants to be pegged by a woman like arguing with one. And if you guys know, y'all follow my content, and I talk so much about rule number 2. We don't argue with women. Women have their own issues, and so do men. We can learn to mitigate our issues by observing the conflict management skills of women. Basically, if you ever see women argue and whoever wins, what's usually the reward for winning an argument with a woman? Okay, keep that in mind, because this entire thing is about rule number 2. And if you're not familiar with rule number 2 comes from, then you haven't got the book yet. You need to go get the book. Accountable Masculinity. Yeah, identifying the disciplined man in you. And part of being a disciplined man is knowing when to disengage from unhealthy conflicts. So the men that have a problem recognizing when to disengage from a conflict, they're dangerous men. They'll argue with women. How far will they go when they argue with men? Keep that in mind. Let's see what else we got. When I see women and men arguing, I see the children of overbearing mothers and fathers without a backbone. Think about when you were a kid and you had a sibling, or you had some other conflict and adults were there to supervise. There was always somebody there to break it up or create some kind of rules and boundaries on respectful communication. So when I see men and women arguing, I'm like, what in the world could they possibly be beefing about if they don't know each other and they're not even in a relationship? And it's just intriguing. And I think about it at some point when your mother isn't involved, and if your father comes around, they say, hey, if I got to come back over here, I'm going to deal with it the way I'm going to deal with it. And your mom might do that too, you know, in terms of establishing respectful communication between siblings or whoever else that you're in conflict with. But the older we get, that behavior if it never gets corrected, how does it look on adults? And that's what you see. It's so immature. You can't do anything but associated with childish behavior. So that's what I see. I see children. A lot of men are struggling with being able to vet women that they can trust because of consistent rejection by women. So
no
you
lies
disagree with
told,
any of that?
none detected. Yeah, that's why I don't argue. No, I don't argue. Arguing solves nothing. I always tell people, I'll do 2 things with an individual. I'll have a discussion with you because discussions are healthy. Discussions are where you find out what's right. Debates are for finding out who's right. We can have those so long as they're cordial, healthy, and nobody's yelling. When you get beyond that, what you said about the father saying, I'm going to handle things my way, or the mother, that is very apropos, because you got people who just don't understand that you can sit down and you can have discussions regardless who the participants are. But make sure it's healthy. Are you out here to try and malign people, or are you out here, trying to grow? A lot of people aren't trying to grow. They want to be stuck in this this, I'm gonna call it a unimind set. They just want to have one mind. They don't want to think critically about anything else. They don't want to hear about another perspective because they don't think it's another perspective. It's like it reminds me of the old adage of kids needing to be seen and not heard. And now we come to the age of, damn, that kid said something profound and I never thought about it. Why? Because you never opened up your mind to think that somebody else besides you can have a cogent thought. So when you run around like that as an adult and you're in a relationship with a person whose opinion you don't value, you got a problem. Because now that person is not going to feel heard. They're going to wonder, well, you know what? Am I dating the wrong kind of person? Have I married the wrong kind of person that doesn't value my input? You may not use it, but at least allow me to speak. This is why when when a situation comes down and you might be a manager at a place and you have a conflict between two employees, you're supposed to hear both employees out. The same thing with a complaint. Hear the person out who's making the complaint. Hear the person out who the complaint's being made against. That way you can make a cogent decision based on all pertinent information. If you don't have the pertinent information, then you're making a half-assed decision. Might be my opinion, but that's how I've always seen things.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that the type of content that needs to be made has to, like, if people want to see a solution, rather, because a lot of people, it is the irony and the hypocrisy of social media is that some people come to social media looking for a solution, but they try to argue their way to a solution.
Right.
And I think the first thing you got to do is a process of elimination by making sure you're not make sure you're in the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you got to put some boundaries on who's allowed in the conversation and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, I think, discriminated by behavior. People have to ask more questions than make attacks towards people.
Right.
And that's why, like, the disciplined thinking people, I've been talking about that since the very first time that you ever got on camera with when I came over on the other pod with you guys.
Yes.
Like, I believe that there's disciplined people and I believe there's undisciplined people.
Correct.
And you could tell by the language they use if they're disciplined or not. You can sense out disingenuous conversation. You can tell at this point by the level of interaction. It's not that many scripts that people can operate off of.
I agree there.
Because you can't make two decisions at the same time.
No, you can't. It's cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, if you come in with a disingenuous question, you either need to tag somebody or you just saying something to be incendiary, to provoke. I provoke intentionally. I tell y'all, if anybody that'll talk to me, man, I'm intentionally provoking y'all. You know what I'm saying? But I'm doing it in a very structured way because this is the type of outcome I'd like to have. You know what I'm saying? Somebody to get up here and be able to not necessarily justify and substantiate what they think, but I believe other people are provoking things too for the same reason. So, like, but I don't play games I can't win, and I'm not playing. so I'm being very, very intentional because I care about contributing to the conversation that leads to solving the gender war. And I don't care how crazy it sounds. Everything sounds crazy to somebody that ain't got no solutions,
Right.
And so we're not all using social media for the same reasons. You know what I'm saying? I'm using it as a networking tool. I want to help people. I want to help them rationalize what they got going on. And shout out to my man Leonard. He just said, most people. He was talking about most people are on social media looking for conflict. Yeah. And I understand why for some people log in for entertainment purposes, but I think after a while, though, if you're only getting entertainment by shaming people and you're only logging in to shame people, we've been having the same conversation for 5 years. We could be doing a whole lot more productive engagement with each other if we had, I guess, a more willing spirit to say, hey, I got a question about this. I'm trying to rationalize this because the back half of your life is here.
It is. It really is.
And so, what would you say was a major turning point for you to start thinking differently, or not even thinking differently, but asserting yourself differently? Because the thought was already there. You just had to be like, hey, I don't have enough information to assert myself just yet. But when you start getting it, what do you say the moment was that triggered you to? Because everybody's life pivots off of one moment and one decision, I believe, that leads to a series of decisions.
When I ran for city council, that was 2011. I realized two things then. I was going to have to take some shots. And when I say shots, I mean personal attacks. I was going to have to take some personal attacks from my own people.
Right.
And then I was
Of
going to have
course.
people that didn't know me that was going to support me. And it opened up a world not known to many black men. So I walk into certain places and people say, I remember you. You did this, 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 and this. And it filled me with a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, even though I didn't win. Because the kind of wherewithal it takes to stand up in front of your constituency and say, hey, look, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. And I'm here, good, bad, indifferent, but I'm putting my name out here in front of everyone.
So check this, right? Like what you did, and let me describe that. See if I can best capture it. You put your purpose above your emotions.
Yes, yeah, and that's hard to do when black people, almost as a collective, look at the political system as being rigged or as being against us. It is very difficult to make headway in that, and I found out the hard way, and I'm better off for it because I can sit down and have a discussion with a man like Victor, and I can say, you know what, you got a point. I may not like him, and I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying because, and I said this before. People look at the dialogue between us or anybody and say, y'all don't get along. No, we have differing views, but we're willing to sit down and talk about how those views differ and how they can be helpful in bringing people together and into the fold. Not everybody's always going to agree. That's the first thing we need to understand. But the willingness to work together trumps all of that. And when you got a group of black men who are willing to work together, it frightens people. I'm late to the party. I just saw the movie Panther by Mario Van Peebles. Yeah. Excellent movie. If you've never seen it, watch it. Mm-hmm. It's a group of people who didn't always agree, but they saw the bigger picture. They put their differences aside and said, you know what? We got something here.
I think we got a tough time compartmentalizing. Mm-hmm. And that to me is one of the first indications of people not having people being overmothered and underfathered.
Yes. Yeah.
And because you have to have your scenes, like how you're going to respond is already modeled for you,
Yeah.
And so this is why I say when I talk about radicalization, because for the people that don't know, like I've studied counterinsurgency and insurgency, radicalization. I've worked in military intelligence, psyops. I've done a lot of things that deal with marketing and tactical manipulation of a local populace. And the people that are most susceptible to what I'm talking about are usually people that don't have any emotional discipline, because you can't learn if you can't control your emotions.
Right.
You literally cannot ingest information. You're going to just listen to respond. And when you think about listening to respond in the macro, that's how social media works. It doesn't put people that want to collaborate for a solution in close proximity with one another. And then even less people have the ability to teach or disarm the other person so they can hear the message, because they think that there's a landmine somewhere in the conversation that they're going to step on. Is going to be a trick at some point, and I can't say that I blame them. I just think that with the correct exposure to healthier conversation and dialogue, I think people can say, let me think on it. Like, don't be so fast to respond to stuff when the information is coming from a place of care and concern. And it can be useful if you compartmentalize it properly, because the skills that I'm talking about, these things I'm talking about are skills to help people be better everywhere they go. You know what I'm saying? You have way less issues. Like we live the era in which we live, most people you walking around and standing by, you don't know what they're consuming. So you don't know how they're thinking. And you don't know how they're internalizing it or making it part of their communication, because you talk about what you learn. You can hear how far a conversation can go in terms of if it's going to be argumentative, if it's going to be helpful, if it's going to be productive or not, right? And that's based on the emotional discipline of the person that's communicating, you know. And I think that it's very important, even if you can't solve anybody else's problems, it's helpful for you to recognize threat, because not everybody's going to want to listen to you. Not everybody's going to respect what you say, not even respect you. Some people are going to respect you, but not respect what you say. But how long and how many conversations you're going to have with somebody that says they respect you, but doesn't respect what you say? How many of those conversations you're going to have with those types of people before they really just come out and say something reckless because they say they always hated you to some degree, you know? So this is about recognizing threat for the most part, you know, because not everybody has the same interest, because they don't have the same background, don't have the same day-to-day routines.
Right.
We do, a lot of us do, we're different and we do the same things for different outcomes and different reasons. So when we're in these you know, like I guess repetitive dialogues, at what point do people say, you know what, this is only useful for me internally? I don't have to go project this on the other people negatively and in turn weaponize the information that I've learned just to shame people, you know? Because I think for this gender war that people say that they want to end, or they tired of hearing about it, but while participating in conversations other than just trying to, you know, like one up somebody else's comment, then what does it look like? You know, and from time to time, I will say I have caught myself still, you know what I'm saying, in you know, in a small skirmish here and there, but only when it presents an opportunity to have a conversation that leads to a solution.
Yeah.
Because it's necessary to get your hands dirty if you're gonna fix a problem. You're not gonna change your alternator on a car or whatever part without getting your hands dirty. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have to meet. And when people say meet people where they are, okay, so you want me to get in there and throw some punches. So if I got to meet you where you are and you're in the middle of conflict, I'm not gonna come in there talking about, let me tell you, you know, like knocking on your door and talking about, let me tell you about your car insurance. I don't have a soft approach. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessary anymore.
All right, young man, I gotta be to work at 11 o'clock, so I gotta cut out. Always appreciate chopping it up with you, man. Yeah, find out what's going on with Garrett, man. Make sure that brother's on the up and up, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out to him.
As always, anytime, man, you want to connect and you want to chop these types of conversations up, because I think it's important where, you know, people need to have a knowledge, not necessarily understanding, because people don't necessarily have to agree, but everything is always, or should be, at least for me, should be knowledge based. That way, when an individual is speaking, they know what's up.
Yeah.
You know, they can say, well, I know this, just like your background, your military background, you can say things for certain, and others may disagree with you, but you're asking them, but what are you disagreeing with? Oh, I don't know, I just disagree. You know, they don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just better let them go on.
Yeah,
all right, man.
When you know the truth, you don't have to argue, man. That's correct. It. So,
all right, man. Let me get out here and go make some money.
All right, then.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Shout out to Herbert for joining the conversation. And look, man, I greatly appreciate you guys for tuning in. This conversation, I'm probably going to do a series on this because I want to see people get to a point of respectful communication. And I know everybody else is not going to get there. I do it. I do understand that. That is not, it's not my overall intent is to, I just want to deal with people that respect each other. And I think that's what the intent for Beyond the Algorithm is. And I greatly appreciate you guys for dedicating a little bit of time to sit down and watch this, catch it on the replay. And for those of you who haven't already, go cop the book, Accountable Masculinity, Identifying the Disciplined Man in You. Process information a little bit more before you respond, and take your time. Take your time. Stay away from people that put you in a defensive. And with that being said, live your life beyond the algorithm. Get off of this app.